we're going to start today by looking at a quick 6 before we start our crime and deviance work. So you've got 6 questions here. Firstly, what is meant by the sandwich generation? Secondly, what are 2 strengths of a structured interview? Number 3, what are 2 reasons why boys underachieve in education? Number 4, what's the Equal Pay Act from 1970? Number 5, what is the correspondence theory in education? So a little hint, that's to do with Marxism. And question 6 from an earlier unit right back at the start of year 9, what is the difference between canalisation and manipulation? So press pause, give yourself 3 or 4 minutes, answer those questions. Okay, so let's go through the answers then. So number 1, what is meant by the sandwich generation? So the sandwich generation, I am a really good example of the sandwich generation. I had my children slightly later in life. I was 34 when I had my first child. Because I'm a slightly older mum, not that old, but a little bit older, it means that I'm sandwiched at this age now, of being in my mid-40s, between looking after young children who still need me, they're only 10-ish, and then also looking after more elderly parents because I'm that bit older. My parents are older, in their 70s, and need a bit more support. So therefore I am a generation stuck between and sandwiched between looking after parents at the top bit and looking after my children at the lower bit. So I'm sandwiched between those 2 generations, both of whom need me. And it's much more common these days, as women in particular are having their children at a slightly later age. Number 2, what are 2 strengths of structured interviews? So the main strength really of structured interviews is that because they're formally structured with certain questions, the same questions to everybody, they're good and easy to analyse, to create data. So they give you really clear, valid and reliable results. It does mean that anybody could do them really, because they're a set of standard questions. So it could be that you could have 10 or so interviewers all doing the same questions, and it wouldn't matter too much because there would be less in the way of interviewer bias because the questions are very clear. So that would be the main sort of strengths of structured interviews, all to do with reliability, validity, getting yourself some data, comparing information, making life easier to organise it time-wise because lots of people could interview and get the same reliable information. What are 2 reasons why boys underachieve in education? So school is basically seen as quite a feminist thing. It is seen that boys prefer to do more physical activities, whereas school is a lot around writing. A lot of teachers are female, so boys don't have male role models within school. In some particular peer groups, particularly if you look at sort of the Black Afro-Caribbean and so on communities, it's not cool to be good at school if you're a boy. It's much cooler and it matters more to have acceptance from your peer group than it does from your teachers. So all of those sorts of reasons are reasons why boys are more likely to underachieve in education. What is the Equal Pay Act 1970? So the Equal Pay Act in 1970 was designed to stop discrimination, particularly with regards to gender. So the idea was that it would bring women up to having the same level of ability to go for the better paid jobs and to be paid fairly and equally. There could no longer be discrimination on the basis of gender for pay in particular, but also conditions and, as I say, job opportunities. Bear in mind that we still do have a gender pay gap, so there's a lot of sort of criticisms around whether that has actually worked in practice. Number 5, the correspondence theory. So the correspondence theory is a Marxist theory, and it's the idea that school is a microcosm, one of Mr. Lapham's favourite words. In other words, it is preparing you for the future as a worker, in particularly a proletariat worker. So the idea is that you go to school and school teaches you to do as you're told. It teaches you that there is a hierarchy. It teaches you to work for rewards. It teaches you to do quite routine, monotonous things. So in school you go from lesson to lesson to lesson to lesson. In work you just do the same thing. Da, 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 da. In school you have rewards like praise points and so on and so forth. In work you have rewards of pay, and so on and so forth. So the idea, the reason it's called correspondence is because school corresponds to the same thing in the workplace. Those 2 things are familiar, therefore school is training proletariat, obedient, do as they're told workers, is the Marxist idea behind the correspondence theory. If you remember, it is a theory put forward by Bowles and Gintis. And number 6, what is the difference between canalisation and manipulation? So remember, my class, I always teach it as it's like a canal. So canalisation, the idea is parents push their children into one activity or another. So for example, a child might, if they are a boy child when they're small, they might be pushed into doing football, rugby, those sorts of boy activities, and a girl might be taken off to ballet or gymnastics or that sort of thing. Manipulation is more about how the person is treated. So this idea of boys don't cry, man up, that sort of thing being said to your boy child, and girl children be expected to be a little bit feminine. Oh, come on, don't play in the mud, you're a little girl, that sort of thing. So that's canalisation and manipulation. Sue Lees and Anne Oakley, for those if you want to have a look at the studies at any point to catch yourselves up. So today we're going to do an assessment question of the first few bits that you've learned from the Crime and Deviance unit, and we're going to do an RMI. So we're going to read a question from somebody else, we're going to mark it, and we're going to improve it. So Mr. Lapham has already done an example of this question. So write that title in your book, and then what we will do is on the next slide you can see the example. You will need to print off the sheet that is attached to this lesson as well in order to be able to do this, and then we would ask that you stick it into your books. So this is the main activity then, the RMI. So what you have in your books is the sheet that you can see copied at the bottom there, but on the screen you've also got a mark scheme, so you can see how to get the different marks between 1 and 5, band 1, 2 and 3, and what you've got there is an answer that we've already done for you. So what you're going to do is you're going to read the answer. So it says the courts have a lot of jobs to perform in the UK. They decide if a person who's been arrested goes to prison or not. There are two types of courts, called a magistrates court and a community court. So that's your answer that Mr. Lapham has given you. So your first job is on the sheet, on your little AOB sticker, is to mark that work. Give it a mark and then say what's gone well and what the next steps might be. Look for all sorts of things. So look for some of the extension that needs to be done. Look for some of the keywords. Are they used correctly? Are they spelt correctly? Is it all well explained? And in particular, look at the mark scheme and see which bits are good and which bits are missing. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to improve that answer. So you're going to try, having looked at it, you're going to try and now mark a 5 marker, write rather a 5 marker. So now you can see an example question. You can see what's good about that one and what needs improving, and you can now do your improvement. So what I'm going to ask you to do in a moment is press pause, write on the sheet that improvement, and then what you'll need to do is stick it into your book. And this particular sheet does need to be handed in to us if you're working at home. So what I would ask that you do is you do take a photo of it and send it to us, or if you want to, you can type out your improvement paragraph and send it to us via email. Either thing is fine, but we do need to see where you have done this particular task, because this is an assessment question that we do need to mark for you. So press pause and complete that question. Allow yourself about 10 minutes maximum. Okay, and then finally, what we'd like you to do for the rest of the lesson, you've probably got 20 to 25 minutes left. What I would like you to do, a number of years ago in the 80s, there was the Hillsborough disaster, a very, very big event that happened at a football ground that you may have heard about. I can vividly remember it happening. I was shopping. It was a Saturday. I'd gone to visit my dad, and we were shopping in Bognor Regis town centre, and as we walked past, in the old days there was little Curry's shops on the high street with all the televisions in the window, and I can remember seeing this disaster unfold on the television and people all standing around watching in the windows. A very big and shocking event. So what I would ask you to do is spend some time now researching the Hillsborough disaster. Try to figure out what happened, why it happened, what were the effects of it, and in particular, how were the police involved. So all we want at the moment is some factual information about the Hillsborough disaster, because it's something we're going to do a case study on next lesson. So we want you to come to next lesson with the facts in your hand, so you know what happened and how it happened and why it happened. Okay, thank you for listening today. Well done, and we will see you next time.